All right, this lesson is part 2 of 9.3 multiplying polynomials. So yesterday we multiplied monomials by polynomials. Today what we're going to be doing is multiplying two binomials together, okay? I'm just going to review really quick though, and this is what we worked on today. When we take a monomial on the outside and we multiply it by a polynomial, we need to make sure we distribute it to all three terms. And when we take 5x times x squared, remember for the number part, we're just multiplying 5 times 1, that stays 5. When we multiply x times x squared, we would add the exponent to get x cubed. Next term, 5x times negative 3x, I'm going to take that 5, multiply by negative 3, and I would get negative 15. Then when I take x times x, I would add the exponents to get x squared. And finally, 5x times 2, that gives me just positive 10x. So there's my answer here. It's already written in standard form. And we can now move on to multiplying two binomials. Alright, so now that we're multiplying binomials, this is a little bit trickier than just multiplying a monomial like we did in example 1 here where we can just distribute. This is sort of like the distributive property, but we have to make sure we distribute it to all the terms all together. So I've got a little kind of mnemonic device here to help you remember how to multiply out all the terms, and I call it the Bart Method, okay? Teachers will probably call it FOIL, so I just want to make sure I go over what that means. You might have even heard a teacher in a different math class talk about FOIL, so I will definitely use that term every once in a while, but I like to use the Bart method is what I call it, because it kind of helps you to figure out which parts you're going to multiply. Alright, so let's get started. So the Bart method is basically called that because you make a face when you multiply. So what you're going to do when you see a binomial, so like this is x minus 4, there are two terms here, multiplied by another binomial with two terms. What you're going to do is take the first term here, this x, and multiply by the first term over here, okay? And we would get x times x. So let's do that over here, x times x, which is x squared. The next term that you're going to do is negative 4 times 2. So the second term here times the second term over here. And when I do that, negative 4 times 2 gives me negative 8. Now, the next part, you're actually going to come underneath. You're going to do is nose. So far, if you haven't if you're not able to tell, I know this is kind of a bad picture, but right now we've got some eyeballs that we just made. Okay. Now we're going to do the nose, negative 4 times x, the two middle parts. When I multiply that, I get negative 4x. Finally, I'm going to take the outside, and this is going to be kind of a smile here. X times 2, that's 2x. And then if I put some hair on him on the top, that kind of looks like Bart Simpson. Maybe you don't think so, but hey, that's what I came up with, alright? Okay, so we're almost finished with this. If you look at your answer here that we've got for all these terms, when I look at negative 4x and 2x, these two terms, they're like terms, so I can actually combine these. So I'm going to drop down the x squared. The next term I would write would be negative 2x, because negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. So negative 2x, and then drop down that negative 8. So this is actually my final answer here. When I multiply two binomials, I get a trinomial. Okay, that's very interesting. So when you multiply two binomials, most often you're going to get a trinomial. Not every time, but a lot of the times. Okay? Alright, so the word FOIL is also another mnemonic that people use, and I definitely want to talk about what that means. The F in FOIL actually stands for first. Okay, meaning you use the first terms, you multiply the first two terms in the binomials, and that would represent this first eyeball that we created, x times x. The O stands for outside. This time you multiply the outside terms. So we consider this an outside term, and this 2 here an outside term because they're on the outside of this expression. So x times 2, this is when we did the mouth. Okay, that's where we got this term right here. Those are the outside terms. I stands for inside. Oops. You know what? Actually, it's probably better to write outer instead of outside. And then for I, inner, because it's a little bit faster to say first, outer, inner, last. Anyhow, I'll get to that in a second. So the I is the inside term. So you're going to multiply here, negative 4 times x. That was his nose. And then the last term here actually stands for last. L stands for last. So the last two terms in this case would be 4 and 2. They're the last term in the binomial, right? And that was this other eyeball that we created. All right? So FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, last. So now it's completely up to you how you want to remember how to multiply, but I like Bart's face, so I'll probably use that a lot in class. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice. We've got two examples that we're going to work on. And example 1, remember you want to make the eyeballs first. We're going to take x times x. That would give me x squared. For the next term, I'm going to take the other eyeball, which is the 3 times 6. So 3 times 6 is positive 18, so that's plus 18. Now I want to do his nose. For his nose, that's 3 times x, the two inside parts here. So that's 3x. 3 times x is 3x. And then finally, let's do the outside terms here, the mouth. X times 6, that gives me 6x. So there's his little face right there, okay? And now I'm going to combine like terms. You always want to make sure that you look back at your answer to see if you can combine any like terms. Here I've got 3x and 6x. So when I simplify this, the x squared for sure should come first because we're going to write in standard form. We want that x squared term first. But then here we can take 3x and 6x and make that 9x. And then the 18 will just drop down. So there is my final answer here for number 1. All right, let's try one more problem. In number 2, we're going to make the eyeball first, 2x times x. That gives me 2x squared, okay? Now, I'm going to take the other eyeball, which is 3 times negative 1, which is negative 3, so I write minus 3. And then let's do the nose. Here we get 3 times x, so that's positive. I'll write plus 3x. And then the last terms here are going to be that smile right here. 2x times negative 1. It gives me negative 2x, so I'm going to write minus 2x. All right, so again, there's his little eyeballs and hair. And really, here's the ears too. That's kind of why I think it looks like a face even more. All right, now we can go ahead again and look for like terms. So 2x squared is just going to drop down. And then the last two terms here, this 3x and negative 2x, I want to make sure I combine those. So 3 minus 2 gives me positive 1. So I'm going to write 1x and then drop down that negative 3. And there is my final answer. So again, we had two binomials that we multiplied, and we ended up with a trinomial. So we start off with two binomials, we multiplied them together, and we get a trinomial. Doesn't happen every single time, but with a lot of the problems that we're going to practice, we're going to always get trinomials. Not always, but a lot of the time. All right, good job. I will see you guys in class tomorrow.